Hello and thank you so much for joining me today over here on Wow Embossing Powder's YouTube channel. My name is Sasha Reade. Today I've got a fun set of projects to share with you. I've got 3 different ways that we can work with tape in our embossing. So we are still going to heat emboss, but we're going to use double-sided adhesive and we are going to create some really awesome patterns and some beautiful cards. So I've started out by cutting myself a nice little card topper. This was about 1/2 centimeter shorter or smaller than my card base, which is a standard UK size card base, a 6 card base. So whatever card size you're working with, just cut yourself a nice little panel to go on the top. It makes it easier when we are embossing and doing this sort of taping. We can trim off those tape edges and we don't have to worry about it being directly onto our card front. So I'm going ahead and sticking some strips down. I went for diagonally across my card. You could obviously go vertical or horizontal. I'm just making lines and I'm eyeballing the spacing. I'm not really thinking too much about it. It's quick, it's easy, and it looks gorgeous in the end. For this first design, I'm primarily working with Dappled Pearl Effects, which is a newish set of embossing trio powders from Wow, plus these 2 here, Sea Mist and Oceanic. I'm going to use them. They are all opaque embossing powders, and I'll touch base on that in a minute and kind of give you a quick little explanation between different kinds of embossing powders. But I wanted some blues, and I kind of wanted a graduated color of blues, and then obviously it finished off with that nice little green color. And I am going to do 1 strip at a time. So I peel off the release sheet on one of my lines and then I go ahead and put that embossing powder on and I just kind of press it in a bit. And you can kind of rub it in, like there's a glitter technique where you can kind of rub the glitter into the tape. You can sort of do that with the embossing powder, though it does stain your fingers a little bit. So I tend to just push down on that embossing powder onto that tape quite firm along the whole way, and then I can go ahead and brush the excess off with a paintbrush. Now because we're using sticky tape, it's not like embossing ink. It will hold your embossing powder, so you can be quite aggressive with brushing over the top of it with a paintbrush. I wouldn't go super aggressive, but you can brush directly over it and brush off all the excess, which means that you can switch between colors really, really easily and you're not going to get transfer between colors because you can brush off all that excess nice and easily. And obviously the release tape or the release paper on the back of your tape is quite staticky, so the embossing powder will stick to it as you go. But as I said, take a paintbrush and you can just brush it right off. And look at these gorgeous colors. I haven't even heat set them yet and they're beautiful. And this is what I did with every one of my cards. I have this big flat paintbrush and I came in at the very end before I started heat embossing just to get rid of all the extra little strays that may have kind of popped off. And I just take those and pop them in the bin. It's just the tiniest bit of wasted embossing powder, like absolutely teeny bit, but it gets it nice and clean so that the white is white. It stays beautiful and it stays crisp. So it's a really awesome way to do some embossing and do multiple colors and not have any kind of transfer between the however many colors you're doing, I should say. So here it is all heat set. It looks a bit bumpy, but some of those are sort of glitter embossing powders, so they are a bit more dimensional. And you can see the gorgeous colors, and it just took a couple minutes to do. Now to turn this panel into a beautiful finished card, I'm going to start by adding some foam tape to the back of the panel to allow me to pop it up a bit off of my card base. So that's a standard A6 card base. And then I decided I wanted a nice big sentiment to kind of go in the middle and draw your eye in a bit. And so I found this really old set. I think almost everything I've used today is retired or expired, apart from the embossing powders. So you're going to struggle to find any of these in the shops. But I will do my best to link everything I've used down below for you. But this cute little set is all about being a crafter and a creator. And so I thought I wanted to use this to give to some of my creative friends and make some cards for them. So I've taken my Wow embossing ink and I've kind of blobbed it all over the end of this bit of card just so I could have a nice thick layer of embossing so that my sentiment matches the background. So I picked the color that I used for that middle strip out of the 5, and then I'm going to go ahead and die cut the layers that it came with and then glue them all together. So I decided to go with white on white because I didn't want to add any more colors into the mix. I've already got those 5 colors and I felt like that was plenty. And then having that kind of middle color be the sentiment felt like it kind of tied that in together a bit more. So when those are all glued together, I'm going to go ahead and pop them up with a little bit of foam onto the front of my card. And I felt like it needed a little bit more of a sentiment, so I grabbed the stamp set that coordinated with these dies and pulled out the To My and Friend stamps from the set. I really wanted these to kind of blend in with sort of the shine going on the card, so I decided I would stamp it in black and then heat emboss it in clear. And I find that's the best way to go if you want black on your card. I feel like you can get a really nice crisp black image, and then you can get that shine by adding the clear embossing powder over it. So I'm using Onyx black ink from VersaFine, and this is a pigment ink, so it stays wet for a while. This way I also find that when I stick that clear embossing powder on, if it goes a little bit messy, then I don't have black specks anywhere because I use black ink rather than black embossing powder. So whenever I do black, I always stamp it in black and heat emboss in clear. And I did heat set this off screen, so I have heat set them. It's all nice and embossed. It's not still wet, or dry I should say. And to finish off the card, I've grabbed some Nuvo drops in another kind of teal color, and I'm just adding a few dots of those around the card. And this ended up being my favorite one out of all of them. It took the least amount of time, and I love how pretty it looks. For my next card, I really wanted to use this Dappled Effects Fruit and Nut Trio. So they're really pretty kind of teals and pinks all together. And I felt like I wanted to go for a mix-up of a design. So I've gone for a square base. This is a 5 by 5 inch square base, and my little panel is 1/8 of an inch smaller than my base. Now for this card, I wanted to mark the central point on all 4 sides. So I'm using this sort of centering ruler. I do have the Tim Holtz one, but my daughter borrowed it and I don't know where it's gone. I haven't seen it since. So this is one in centimeters I picked up from the dollar store in Canada. But all you need to do is sort of mark the central point on each side, and then we're going to kind of go from there. So once you've got all those 4 sides marked, make sure it's with the pencil so we can erase it later. We're going to grab our double-sided sticky tape again, and we're going to create a fun pattern. Now I'm going to take my tape and I'm going to run it from the outside of that little mark to the inside or outside of the other mark. I'm kind of keeping it the same so that when I do the tape along the other edges, it will touch that tape and not overlap, if that makes sense. So if you're watching what I'm doing here, so I've got that tape going from sort of just inside or outside that line, and then the same on the other line, so that then they aren't overlapping, they are just touching. I hope this is making sense. It's a great way to get a nice sort of even diamond shape around your card without having to do too much measuring or too much thinking. I don't like cards that involve a lot of thinking. It stresses me out. Now I am trimming off my tape mostly between each layer just so that they don't end up making a big sticky mess. And when we're done that, we're left with this gorgeous sort of diamond shape. But I wanted to fill in some of that empty space a little bit more. So I'm going to add another little strip and just eyeball it along the edge of each of those corners. So once I'm all done that, I can come in and erase those pencil marks so I don't forget about them. And then we can start playing with our embossing powders. Now I felt like it'd be a really fun idea to get sort of a double embossing powder color going on one of these lines. So I am peeling back the release sheet and I'm lining it up exactly with the other side, so the opposite side. So I'm folding it right in half. So I'm folding back that release sheet, and when it touches the exact other side, I'm kind of pinching it in the middle, and then it's only revealing half of that line. So I do that on all 4 sides, and then I've got what looks like this. And what we can do is we can add our embossing powder onto those lines, and it won't go onto the rest of the embossed the rest of the tape, because that release paper is still there. So as I did before, I'm going to go ahead and push down, and you'll see how much static there is on this card front. You'll see all that embossing powder stuck all over the place. I take my nice big brush and I just dust it all off gently, and it all comes off the release sheets nice and easily, and it doesn't lift those release sheets either. And then that way I've got that sort of gorgeous color just in one spot, but I haven't got heaps of embossing powder all over the rest of the card. Now, a fun fact side note, I found out that WOW embossing powders don't actually need like a heat embossing powder bag, anti-static powder bag, because in their embossing powders they put something in it so that they're not staticky. Obviously they're sticking to the release papers because that's so staticky as it is, but if you notice the cardstock, it's not actually sticking to the cardstock anywhere, and that's a design in their powders, which I thought was quite cool and I had no idea about. So I've added on that second color, and you can see you've got this really cool effect, and it's perfectly even because we used that sort of measurement to mark where we should start the tape from, and then because I folded that tape exactly in half, it kind of took measuring out of the equation for that part, and now we've got this cool looking diamond shape. I don't know how to describe it. I was just having fun playing with geometric shapes at this point and having a good time with my tape. Now I'm going to peel off that extra edge piece, and I'm going to do it all in the same color. So this is the one trio, so I know they all go together. I know they all look really nice together. And then I can heat set that one. And at this point I kind of felt like, oh, I need something else. I need a bit of shine in there. I want something else to be on this. And that's when I got this idea to grab my really thin red line tape, because this is the only stuff I had that was really thin. So whatever double-sided tape you've got, and I decided to layer that along the edge of that first diamond shape that we made. And then that way I can add some gold embossing to my card and give it just a little bit of bling. So you can have a real play with whatever sizes of tape you've got and have a lot of fun creating some different patterns across your paper. So I'm using the polished gold superfine embossing powder. And again, I'm just going to peel off all those release sheets, dump the gold on there, give it a little bit of a rub to make sure it's sticking to that tape. And then I can brush off all the excess and heat set it. And it is so pretty. And I don't know, I'm not sure if I like how I went from here, but this bit alone, I thought, wow, I love how this looks. Now you can see where I didn't push down quite as hard as I did on other areas. It kind of looks a little bit blotchy. So that's why it's quite good to push down with your fingers and just kind of stick it into that tape a little bit as well. Again, this is a set that is no longer available. And I might come back onto this card and I might cut myself a little square to go right in the middle, because I stamped this image out and I felt like it was too much. I felt like it was too dark. So I decided to add the outline as well, to kind of add some more gold back in. But I don't know. Tell me what you think. I'm not sure I like it. I'm not 100% sure about it. So I did that first image. I stamped it in a deep red VersaFine ink. So it was a nice pigment ink. And then I heat embossed it with clear over the top. And then I am going and adding the outline in gold. So here you can see when it's all done. And I think because I put that clear on there, the gold kind of merged with the clear a little bit and kind of made it a bit more blurry. So I don't know how I feel about this sentiment, but I might add another panel, or I might just leave it. Who knows? Anyways, I went and stuck it onto my card base, used a little bit of liquid adhesive so I had a bit of wiggle room if I didn't line it up quite central. And then this is a little side note I wanted to share with you, because I did try embossing using my dies. So I wanted to have a nice little circle, and this is what happens. If your die cuts are too thin, so you could do a nice big shape like a flower or something, but if you want to do like little edging dies like this and get kind of like a multiple layered effect using dies, you're going to struggle to stick them down. It's really floppy and it's really hard to separate the release paper from that image. So just as a side note, you might get a little frustrated if you try and do dies, because I did and it didn't work. Now for my next card, I am going with some fun colors that kind of go together and create purple. So I'm using blues and pinks as well as a purple because I didn't have a third pink. But I wanted to do some kind of plaid effect. I think it's called plaid. So I pulled out these ones, and these are translucent embossing powders. So you remember how at the beginning I said about opaque and translucent? So opaque is solid. You can't see through it. It will cover up whatever you do. Translucent, you can see through. So you can layer the translucent embossing powders and you will get sort of a multiple colored effect. So you can layer red on blue and you will get purple. So the first thing I did was I took a T-ruler to make sure my line was straight, because I'm now going vertical, and I started this without a T-ruler and I was totally wonky donkey. So I decided to get my T-ruler out just for that first line. And it's not amazing because I didn't plan out my lines very well. This is where I'm not so good at sort of mind mapping how many lines and how much my spacing should be. So I've got quite a bigger white gap on the right hand side than the left. But never mind, I do trim it down a little bit and try and make it look a bit more even. But I get the same kind of wonky effect going on when I go the other direction. So here's all my blues, and I kind of saved you the bore of watching me peel off the release sheets and add the embossing powders. But it's the exact same as before. You're going to stick down your tape, add your embossing powders one at a time or one color at a time. And then we're going to switch the direction and add our lines going the other direction. And I did start with a ruler, so the lines are even. They are nice and straight. However, my placement isn't brilliant. Now I did run a bone folder over these second lots of tape to make sure that they're sticking down, because it is quite bumpy and lumpy. But here it is. Here is my sort of plaid background. And you can see the multiple colors going on where they overlap. And it is quite glossy. Now, if I did take more time to push down that embossing powder a bit more, it wouldn't look quite as sort of grainy when I tilt it to the side, but it's still a really cool looking effect, and it still looks like a great background. So here it is finished. I mounted it on some black cardstock, added that crafty again, and added on some white Nuvo drops. And I did come in with that one and add some white Nuvo drops on there just to see if that helped with kind of blending my background together, and I liked it a bit more once I added that. But I'm still a bit unsure about it. So these are my 3 cards that I did today using just tape. I wanted to keep going. I wanted to grab my dies and cut out some bigger dies and stick them on and do multiple colors and multiple dies, but I've run out of time, so this is it for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a go as well. I have done my best to link the products down below for you in the description box. I have stuck down all the names of the colours of embossing powders I used for you today, so they're down there as well. So take care and see you next time.